Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Two Fish at the Table Poker podcast. We're talking about the second half of the 2017 main event this time around. I'm one of your hosts, East Coast Sam.
I'm your other host, Legend Bet on Poker Stars. And, Sam, I often have myself a dry mouth while we're recording this podcast. So I brought myself a beverage. Who wants to see?
Ah, I like it. That is a nice beverage. Tom Brady there. The deflator himself.
Exactly. And considering that we have a player who is a part of the most deflating hand in main event history, I think that was appropriate.
Yeah, we have all the puns worked out this time. So no more ingredient lists.
After a bizarrely edited, oddly mashed together first half of this 2017 main event, the first main event of the quote-unquote Pokergo era of the World Elite Series of Poker, things come back a bit more to normalcy as far as the editing style, with a return to the 4 episodes per day of the tournament structure. I would say it's marginally better quality-wise as a whole, this back 10 of this main event, but I don't think it's quite as good as I might have recalled it being.
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned this many times before on the podcast, how there's just so much natural tension when you get to day 7 when you're 3 tables playing down, and a lot more this time around just because coincidentally we have Michael Rand, we have Lamb, and we have Saout playing for their second main event final table, and then a bunch of first-timers who've been following since the beginning also playing for the final table, and not just as the short stacks, but actually as contenders for the title. So there's a little bit more intrigue toward the back half than there has been in other seasons, just off of a character level. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of people who are under-characterized. We mentioned before how the final 9, with the couple of exceptions, really feel not so – we don't connect to them as much, which is kind of a shame. It's an interesting sort of mix of characters that we have from this stage onward, and in the editing style, reminiscent of previous seasons, but also not really doing its own thing. I mean, it's an interesting sort of hodgepodge of influences to go into the back half of the season here.
My big takeaway is this kind of felt like they were trying to recreate 2016 in a couple of people. And with guys like Charlie Carroll, Mickey Kraft, that, worked in those couple of episodes more or less. And that sort of title kind of moves on to guys like John Hesp, to Jack Sinclair, Scott Blumstein. And again, these are very entertaining, energetic players to watch. The problem being, of course, I like a bit more of a balanced edit, even when you're trying to spotlight a few great characters. And again, John Hesp, in my favorite players of all time. Very entertaining, very rootable, very enjoyable to watch him play poker, very fun style to watch. The big problem, of course, being it creates a under-characterization of the other major players, particularly some of the final table that I would have liked to have seen a bit more personality from as you get to the final 2 episodes of this season of episodes.
Yeah, and both of us were sort of disappointed with the first half of the season, I'd say. Some interesting moments here and there, some interesting poker playing, but nothing too much to really excite us. So we're both, I think, looking forward to the second half to sort of pick things up a notch. And we'll obviously lay out our thoughts on each episode and then give our overall opinion at the end. But yeah, I'm a little disappointed with this back half.
Yeah, and the thing is, day 6, it's kind of your standard day 6 episodes, like kind of a, not cliche, it sounds negative, but it's a very typical sort of run of some notable players making return deep runs, and them running into some bad luck here and there, and some great play and some brutal spots here and there, and it's kind of average day 6 content, which is not a bad thing. It just doesn't make up for the weak sauce of the first half dozen episodes or so. But rather than talk about the generally speaking, let's get right into this.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So episode 9 is the first part of day 6 with 85 players left. For the most part, 2 tables kind of focused down here, tables 1 and table 2. Table 1, we have Ben Lamb, our favorite third place finisher from 2011. Max Silver, who we saw in 2016 make it, square off of Dan Coleman here and there. Ben Pollock, who had kind of a blink and you'll miss at day 7 appearance in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, Dan Ott will actually join that table. And then table 2, we have one of the most remarkable table lineups you'll ever see. We have Kenny Holler, 6th place finisher from the year prior, Antoine Saout, Michael Ruan, Kevin Song, who, maybe not as important, but also, involved in there. We saw him with Liv Paris earlier in the tournament. And then John Hesp joins in one of the way through. And we have kind of a corner of these past number 9ers on that table too, and that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, they had to have done that deliberately, right? There's no way to do that accidentally. Have a murderer's row of November 9ers, and all pretty good players. Like, none of those guys were slouches at all to be there. Come on. Like, that's deliberate. I don't mind it, but,
Well, it's kind of a character-filled episode full of those nostalgic players that I really can root for and enjoy seeing. So that elevates this episode, even though it's kind of an unglamorous, unspectacular episode for the most part. It's kind of the horror show for Kenny Hollert. He kind of has a very rough day 6. John Hesp gets him to his table talk. We hadn't really seen it up until this point because he was only on the outer tables prior to this episode. And we see our first, would you like to see? And then Ruan, of course, says no.
Ruan was on, like, another level this time. Like, he was so anxious and nervous the whole time. It was crazy.
Yeah, normally we see players discuss when they have these back-to-back deep runs. The second time, they're far less stressed because they've been there once and they're a bit more comfortable. Rand is kind of the exact opposite. Now, to be fair, he was kind of fighting for every last chip. He was very tense against Mickey Kraft on day 5. He never really has a super big stack at any point all tournament long, so he's really grinding it out. Mm-hmm. But the table is shocked that Ruan refused to see Hesp's cards, which is kind of funny because Hesp, he's just hanging out, having fun, showing cards. It's probably negative EV to some pros' minds for him to be showing so many hands, but Hesp doesn't care, and it's just great to see Hesp get into the action with that sort of table talk like that.
Absolutely. I mean, the hand against Haller, not to jump the gun here because, the rest – not saying that the other action isn't interesting, but that to me is the highlight of the episode. It's just that hand against Haller because it's Kenny Haller versus John Hesp. It's just such a clash of personalities, and to see so much table talk from Hesp and Haller giving back to him. Well, before, Haller wasn't really super talkative in 2016. I don't really remember too many table talk moments from him, but to actually see him get into it with Hesp and then make that call is just so simple.
It was nice seeing Haller because we had seen him square off against Chino Reem on day 2, so at least there was some earlier preluding to his action later in the tournament. The actual hand that Hollart busts on is pretty brutal. Hollart has ace-6 suited, Hesp has pocket 8s, Hesp flops a set, Hollart flops top pair, and then he rivers trip aces, and there's overcards to his 6, so he's playing the board for his kickers for the ace, and so conceivably Hollart's thinking, Hesp might have an ace, and this is just trying to avoid a chop.
Exactly, yeah.
But the problem is, I don't know. I just don't think Hollart played that hand quite right in the river. I don't think you can bet that big and then still call. I think you need to read into what Hesp's play style was up till that point and maybe just check back, honestly.
Yeah, I'm with you. Hesp also seemed very confident. Haller pointed out, you look confident.
Yeah.
The way that, it's the issue with a lot of big players, that there's a big change in their demeanor from hand to hand. Sometimes some players talk more when they're bluffing. Sometimes they're more reticent. I think Haller should have just taken a moment to just sit there and then fold the trips and wait for a better spot. It's still a tough spot, but I think he can get away from that just based on his demeanor.
The problem is, what worse hand is Hesp calling you with? If you bet 600K on the river, do you think he's going to call you with a king? I don't think he's doing that, and I think you have to pick your spots. He only has 17 big blinds at that point anyway. So if you just check back and you win the hand, you're in good shape. If you lose that, if you check back and you're behind, then okay, no big deal. It's better than losing another 30 or stack betting with an inferior hand. So
yeah.
And we saw a rare in the modern era of the main event, a rare production error. At one point, they showed John Hesp with 9 million chips, and then he wins a hand and he's at 5 million chips. No comprendo.
Very strange typo.
Yeah, so I again, we haven't really seen a ton of those kind of errors really since the classic era of the main event. So it's another black mark on these Pokergo editors, I guess you could say.
Suppose so.
And so And then the kind of the cherry on top of a, pretty typical day 6 episode is Kevin Song flops a full house and is drawing dead to quads. That's just a pretty crazy, epic way to lose in the main event.
Ugh, so sick. Just so sick.
And luckily does not make quads over quads, but nonetheless, it's an exclamation point on an episode that concludes day 6 as part 1 with 58 players left.
Yep.
But then oddly enough, the next episode begins with only 51 left, so no comprendo either. We get a introduction to this episode kind of highlighting the cape and the coat, as I call it. Jonathan Dweck wearing a Superman costume, again, kind of a bait for some bad Joe Stapleton jokes of deodorant. And John Hesp gets moved to table 1, which I guess was kind of a table 1 from before got broken down because Ruan, Saud, and Lamb were all at the same table, not just being moved to Lamb's old table. So, and also Ryan Lang, who infamously folded the best hand to a Dragon Ball Z Jungle Man last WSOP who I spoke to in Vegas. So that was I didn't expect to see Lang in this episode.
Yeah, it's a fun little moment. I mean, yeah, this episode for me, I mean, Hesp's table talk's interesting, but not really sort of any big hands or anything that really caught my eye. Dario shows up. I mean, that's nice. It's always nice to see Dario and Martino in the mix, but that's about it.
We mentioned how amazing that table 2 with Saud, Ruan, and Hollert was, but this is equally as amazing on table 1. We have Ruan, Hesp, Saud, Lamb, and Ryan Lang. That's a pretty awesome table 1 lineup.
It is an awesome lineup. It's just there's not too much to really talk about. I mean, Ruan doubles up at the end. That's about it. I mean, I don't really think
we get to this kind of trademarks. There is his repeat bet sizing, where he bets the same size on the flop and the turn. Ruan even says at one point, "I love it." Like he's got into the Hesp mojo, as is Lamb. He says, "You're my favorite person in the world." Like it's just unbelievable how much the table is eating up John Hesp's antics. So that's. And Hesp climbs up in the chip count, and then all of a sudden overplays Jackson against Ruan and loses a lot of his chips. So, yeah. And then table 2, we get a couple of players who will make day 7 that are kind of, I guess, semi-relevant. There's a hand between Messina and Oliveira, where Oliveira, his table talk clearly gets Messina to fold kings correctly. Mm-hmm. Example of table talk working against you, which to my surprise, it tends to work more than it doesn't, I feel like. So it's nice to see a time where the table talk like that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Right away. It is interesting, yeah.
And oddly enough, we get another flashback. We hate these flashbacks. Only a couple of episodes back to where Hess made that King 8 call. It's like, it was 2 episodes ago, and these weren't even on TV week by week, so there's no reason to have flashbacks like that.
Yeah, we all saw it. It was a good call. We all like it. Move on.
And so this episode concludes with 43 players left. So getting down to that final 27 before day 7 can begin at the halfway point. So we keep the same couple of tables for the next episode with the blinds, gradually escalating. And the Bren Lamb, John Hesp bromance continues. Where John Hesp gets doubled up by Ben Lamb in a ace against ace hand, always kind of fun. And then Hesp raises out of turn and then still beats Lamb. It's just some good stuff. And Hesp has a complete bounce back because he had been up to like 10 million and down to 3 million, and he got back up to 14 million, which is some pretty good chips for day 6 at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's just sweet. He has a segment where he talks about how the poker gods are with him and how it's his time. Kara Scott gives, a segment to the camera that Hesp had never played in a large tournament before. He's only cashed like twice and for like $1,000 both times. It's just very sweet. I mean, it's everybody's rooting for this guy. It's nice he's the reverse Will Kassouf. Everybody was rooting against Will last time. Now everybody's rooting for Hesp. If they got heads up in a hand, Kassouf and Hesp, I think the world would explode. But
I mean, besides that big hand he doubled up Ruan with, Hesp kind of gets the better of a lot of these guys like Lamb at the table.
He does. He really does.
He mixes it up. He plays a lot of maybe less than premium hands, but he makes very well-timed raises, and he just has a way of putting his chips in a way that's just positive EV for him in this tournament.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting, yeah.
And then on table 2, it's kind of the Jack Sinclair bluff party. It's kind of Sinclair's kind of thrust into the spotlight at this point. And on the outer tables, we kind of see a couple of big pots for a lot of the players who will be in the chip lead for the next couple of episodes. That's primarily guys like Pham, Messina, and Blumstein. A lot of, bloated pots getting out of control. Blumstein taking down a 12 million chip pot. This one's going to be a good one for TV. Jonathan Dweck, Superman, bust to a straight flush from Pham in a 20 million chip pot. Again, anytime you lose to a straight flush, it's kind of like amusing, but kind of awful that it happens to you.
I know, right?
And then we see the worst ace-jack shove since 2011, day 5, with Phil Collins is a situation where Marvin puts in 10 million chips of ace-jack into Messina's ace-king. Like, just unbelievable. 10 million chips, the blinds are like 80K, 160K. That's brutal.
Not a good spot. It's just, ugh. It's just so gross to see plays like that. It's like you play so long and you're so close to the end and you just make a mistake like that. It's heartbreaking and disgusting at the same time.
And so this episode kind of is the Hesp, Sinclair, Blumstein show, which is, because again, they're all going to make the final table, and they're going to be major factors through the rest of the edit as well. So this is kind of the appetizer to that. So that is good table setting. But again, it does come at the cost of us really getting to know anybody else.
Right.
Which, again, I like these 3 characters. They're definitely the best characters of this main event, so it makes sense to include them in a lot of the edit. But I think it's a lot about balance and about giving, context for the full tournament, not just for those 3 players.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last part of day 6 gets us down from 30 players down to 27. So it's kind of a that final hurdle, that pay jump. It's not really a bubble per se, but it kind of is, because that's the 4th tables down to 3 tables is that that the biggest pay jump up to that point in the tournament. And so we have 4 tables left, playing down to 27. Some more classic Hesp style raising against Lamb, wins on the flop. It's always like kind of the formulaic John Hesp hand is one player raises, Hesp calls, Hesp makes a min raise on the flop or something, then takes it down. It's just really fun stuff.
It is, and his table banter is just wonderful. Like, he's talking to Saud about his town in England, and they have a conversation. He goes, maybe we get some time, eh? Like, he's trying to have conversations with everybody. Everybody's opening up to him. It's just he's just pulling like Jedi mind tricks or something on everybody. It's just crazy.
And we'll discuss it later, but a lot of the interviews that Hesp gave in that final few days were kind of repetitive. He kept saying, I'm happy to bring fun to the table and stuff, but right. Earlier spots, I feel bad retrospectively thinking that 5 years ago, when it's clear that it was really, something serious, that he was actually, totally correct and right to bring that up over and over.
Yeah.
I will call this the weakest episode of the day 6 quartet, though. I didn't feel that a lot of the hands are kind of forgettable, and I think this is our first Bryan Piccioli setting in the whole edit so far. Was this episode? Is that
the first Bryan Piccioli hand? Yeah, pretty much.
And then I had forgotten actually about Marcel Lusk's deep run in this main event.
Right. Yeah, me too.
I think he's just completely absent in this edit, which you'd think it's Marcel Lusk from 04. I mean, it's 13 years later, obviously, but you'd think, oh yeah, he's going to be dancing around, and he's made it this far. He must clearly be playing pretty good, but he never really accumulates chips, so I guess it's kind of hard to get him in the edit.
Yeah, I mean, of the 27 players we have here, Pham we just saw a little bit of. Sinclair's just sort of shot up in the edit all of a sudden. I mean, yeah, like, he's making crazy moves. Yeah, he's a fun guy, but like, it's kind of a little odd that he just all of a sudden gets this big edit out of nowhere. I mean, I don't really get where that's coming from. I mean, Lamb we know some about, Hesp we know some about, but a lot of these other players are unknown. Like Piccioli just, pops up out of nowhere. I mean, Grieco we don't know anything about. A lot of the people in the bottom part of the field we don't know very much about. And Salas we know a little bit of. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these players are unknown quantities. And I figure when you're out to the final 3 tables, just show us a little bit about each of these guys. How did they get here? What was the style of play that led them to this point? That they were contenders for the final table.
I'm with you. I mean, we learned there's one interview of Dana. We talked about his twin brother, their sort of poker origins. That's some good stuff there. I'm a twin, so it's
right. Exactly.
I always root for the twins, the past November Niners, and the past main event champions. Those are my big 4 categories, and I guess to a lesser degree, just the crazy characters playing wildly like Mickey Krafts and stuff. But So again, Danot fits into one of those niches for me pretty well. I did see Danot and his twin in Vegas back in November. So again, retrospective rooting, always good. Again, of the final 9 up till this point, again, Lamb, Sinclair, a little bit of Ott, and Hesp are kind of in the window there, and that's about it for those final 9, really.
Yeah.
At this point.
At this point, yeah. But I mean, it's still, I mean, we're so far into the season. I figure like you could show a little bit more from each of these guys. It's a little lacking, just all of a sudden in the last few episodes, their edits pick up so monumentally. I feel like to establish character arcs, you have to have beats before them.
Well, also considering that they covered days 1 through 4, you could even have a throwaway shot of a couple of them, maybe one hand, tease them a little bit because you had the full, footage laid out for you when you were concocting this sort of postscript season. So it's a little disappointing, I guess. As a whole, I mean, the Hesp versus Lamb rivalry was pretty fun to watch. It's a pretty good match for the most part. I mean, they both win a few pots. I mean, Hesp does chip up a bit more percentage-wise than Ben Lamb. But Ben Lamb has a very big stack for all of day 6, even with the John Hesp losses in there. And the rest of the action, pretty typical day 6 stuff besides the Hesp, amateur, not amateur, but kind of like pro amateur kind of level moves here that really work out for him in the grand scheme of things.
Yep.
And so much like, main events past, day 7 gets 4 episodes going from 27 players down to 9. However, confusingly perhaps, this first part takes us down from 27 all the way down to 18. So it's a very rushed episode with elimination skipped, a lot of multiple levels covered in this sort of episode's time span. So I have mixed feelings about that. When my theory is, it seemed like the main motivation was they wanted to have as much Hesp as possible.
Yeah.
And to get all that Hesp stuff in there, you had to compress this entire, the first half of day 7 into one episode.
I know, but it's just weird. I mean, Pham starts the day at 31 million chips. He's gone in 19th place. I'd love to see, we see a couple hands from Pham, but I'd like to see what the heck happened.
Well, he lost one semi-big pot to Danot.
Right.
A couple other pots off screen, and then the big one to Ben Pollock at the very end. So we see 2 of the big hands he lost, but again, 2 hands does not tell the whole story when you have 31 million chips. And then I guess something I took notice was the top couple of stacks. So Pham was first to start day 7, and then Valentin Messina was second with 28 million. John Hesp, pretty solid, 21 million in 6th place. And then you had, people all over the place. Ben Lamb was up there at the start of the day. And, but then, of course, there was a lot of short stacks. This is one of those day 7s that had a lot of big stacks and very small stacks. So a lot of those small stacks, obviously bust in this first round of 9 bust outs on day 7. But again, a lot of them are eliminated off screen. 3 of them just completely consecutively, we lost 3 players off screen, no big deal, moving on. And then they did show a little montage of those later, but just show them in order. I don't understand why you can't show those in order.
Yeah, I mean, clearly their interest was in showing as much Hesp as possible, working in a couple hands with Sinclair, which again is fine on an entertainment level, but we're not just looking for entertainment here. We're looking to learn about these guys and how poker is played at this level. And
so not only did they have 3 bust outs in a row not shown, they had 2 bust outs off screen prior to Pisane busting.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And that was off screen, and we didn't see any of that at all, like their bust out hands or an image of them busting out. I think Makoff, wasn't that the guy that played in 2015 against Kelly Mencken and
yeah.
So yeah, it's a guy we kind of know, so you could have shown him a little bit. And very little of table 2 is actually shown, which is odd. I mean, 2 of the 9 bust outs come on table 2, so okay, it's a little bit less than 3, which would have been the average, but still would have liked to have seen it. And then Marcel Luce doesn't really get any love. He is shown busting out in 26th place. He had doubled up prior to his bust out, and we don't see that at all. So that's a shame. And again, it's a lot of negative, but I have to say, I mean, there's some great table 1 action with Hesp. I'm not saying that's fun, but everything around it kind of pulls it down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Hesp's table talk is hilarious. I mean, we do have to mention, he did get a penalty, so we got to be fair. We got to mention the good and the bad here. Everybody knew it was an accident, wasn't trying to angle him or anything. But yeah, that's just kind of funny that happened. And he gets a 2-hand penalty.
it's the continued rise of John Hesp. It goes from 21 million to over 40 million into the chip lead at one point. Very, very cool. I mean, we get, I have a long list of Hesp moments here. We have a great Hesp check raise over Rowan, kind of a classic Hesp move. And then Norm chimes in, it's Will Kassouf's long lost uncle, which, they're from the same country, so I guess it's possible. One of my favorite hands alive from this entire main event, which unfortunately we can't find the live version, was the Hesp Pisane Queen Flush yes hand, where Ali Najad and Nick Schulman were wondering what the heck Pisane was thinking, calling of 2 4s, no heart blocker in his hand when Hesp makes a couple of big bets on the turn and river, and then of course launch had. Did they keep handing him chips? And then Hesp again. He turns over the cards, so it cuts to Pisane mucking his cards, and Hesp goes, yes! And then he goes blows to the crowd, thumbs up, yeah! And it's just great stuff, seeing Hesp happy winning big pots like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I really wish they had the live versions of this, because just seeing them talk about Hesp in real time was just so funny. Yeah. He just comes out of nowhere, in the middle of day 6, they just did the live coverage, and just all the comments. It's just Pokergo, come on.
Balanced edit for Hesp, because we see him win some hands, lose some hands.
Right.
Damien Salas, we finally see Damien Salas. He quads and gets doubled up by Hesp top pair. Hesp busts Pisane with some dumb luck when he has a huge stack, so we can afford to make a call for a few million, turning 2 pair, and then Pisane just I don't believe this. But if you don't play those 4s that poorly, it wouldn't even matter. So
I mean, that's just Pisane's so angry. He's the only one who ever gets kind of angry at Hesp. It's not quite directed at him. It's more the situation. But he's the only one where the mojo just breaks and he's just fuming. It's so funny.
And then Bryan Piccioli, his bromance with John Hesp kicks in. He just chimes in whenever Hesp talks or bets or raises. It's just good stuff. He's you can't believe it. And in the back of your head, the cynic of me is they just kind of playing it up, they want to take advantage of Hesp. But I think these guys have a heart. They actually realize this is actually really good stuff, and they don't need to be like that. Because Hesp's a nice guy. There's no malice in him, unlike Kassouf. So no reason to be mean about it or anything.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so again, it's some really good table 1 action. It's a rushed episode. I think they could have maybe made this a extra length episode, something like that, to make it feel a bit less rushed. That extra 20 minutes could have given us 5 more hands to show us those 5 bust outs or something.
Right.
It would have been totally fine for me. But as is, again, it's a Hesp edit, so it is what it is. But yeah.
Yep. On to part 2.
On to part 2. So again, we're down to 2 tables, a table redraw, and this episode goes from 18 players down to 14.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it slows down a little bit, which is nice to kind of let the tension settle a little bit more. But on the other hand, it's still the Hesp show. So a little bit less this episode, but it's still the Hesp show. So you don't get a real good sense of the tension.
It's very much a top chip stack heavy edit. So for the big stacks, Sinclair, Hesp, Blumstein, and Lamb get the lion's share of the focus, which again, 4 players is not the worst sort of spread of focus. But again, 4 of those guys were among the most heavily featured in the last, 5 episodes or so.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, again, creating this sort of editing imbalance. It's not as rushed by any means. I mean, we only have 4 bust outs, not 9. So that definitely gives, the action more time to breathe. But again, it leaves so many players making these deep runs uncharacterized. It makes their bust outs feel less meaningful. Mm-hmm. I mean, anyone who makes the final 18, you want to care a little bit when they bust out. We've had a lot of main events where pretty much every bust out meant something.
Right.
I'm not saying each one did. That's not reasonable, I think, to suggest. But guys like Krasenko, we don't really know him. I mean, he burns through 30 million chips against Jack Sinclair, so I guess we don't have time to watch him decline and bust out. It all happens all at once. But nonetheless, that's probably the most egregious play of this episode. Is that overplay of the Queens?
Oh my God, Queens versus Kings, and Sinclair also just is hilarious with the faces.
I know.
Calls like Rowan Atkinson. It's it reminds me of just a physical comic or somebody mugging in a movie, just the faces he makes before he calls. But yeah, so egregious.
And especially because Sinclair hit 68 million chips with that bust out of Krasenko, he really can afford to play almost only 2 cards. And so he ends up in a lot of spots where he's maybe I'll call, 4 million more, no big deal. Bryan Piccioli, we kind of see him enter into this pattern on day 7 where he'll double up, will be short stack, double up, chip down, double up again, chip down, double up again, and rinse and repeat. Never really gets any footing or involved in any hands where he's actually, playing a pot where he's not all in. He's just kind of all in or fold at this point in day 7.
Yeah, and Blumstein, we're starting to get a little bit more about. He finally has a segment dedicated to him where he's talking about the feature table and how he's trying to, he hasn't been at the feature table before, he's trying to get used to that. And we get a little bit sort of more about his personality at the table, the hand against Dubini where Dubini shoves on him and he just swears a bunch, and obviously they bleep it all out and then he folds. Yeah. He's an interesting sort of character to be weaving in and out of the coverage here.
Mm-hmm. And it's bizarrely enough, there's a flashback here of Ben Lamb and Scott Blumstein of that odd like full house fold by Lamb against Blumstein. And Lauren calls it the hand of the tournament. I totally don't believe that in the slip. I could name probably 5 or 6 other hands that are easily, like not even debatably better than that hand. So I completely think that was overblown as a statement.
I mean, the hand between Sinclair and Krasenko is a good example. I mean, it rockets Sinclair up to the top. I mean, that's a more important hand than that one.
Yeah. And again, this episode also focuses on kind of the 4 rookies in the field. Right. It looks like those 4 rookies are actually, really, really, important to the proceedings of the tournament because, especially with less than 2 tables left, that's a pretty high percentage of the field too. So that was an impressive happenstance.
Absolutely.
And I just criticized the Krasenko Queens versus Kings hand, but I guess Hesp checking back top set against Sinclair is pretty bad too. Not going to be greedy. I mean, I don't know. I you got to bet a little bit, man.
Yeah, 1 million.
Those 2 million makes a big difference later on in the tournament, man.
Heartbreaking.
And then round 2 of Hesp against Sinclair goes Hesp's way. As the time this does not look like a calling face for Sinclair. It's like, no, well,
usually than a calling face.
Yeah. And so again, Hesp after with some shaky ground earlier on day 7, again continuing to climb the chip counts. Him and Sinclair being 1 and 2 in chips at that second table as day 7 was heading towards the final act of the auction. And so again, it was an okay episode 14. Not great. Focus was a little off, as I would have liked to have seen it, but again, better than the first half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, now that Hesp is sort of settling in, it's more interesting to hear from him. And episode 3, kind of the same deal as before. Even though there's a couple more interesting moments from the other players. The King Jack giveth and the King Jack taketh away, with Blumstein being one of them. Blumstein and Ott, we should mention. Kind of funny to see those two square off a little bit in advance.
Are you saying you're kind of down on this episode? I thought it was one of the best ones of the season.
No, I like the episode. I just thought it was a little bit more of the same, with a little bit too much emphasis on Hesp in comparison to other episodes. A little bit less this time, but yeah.
Great focus. I thought Scott Stewart finally got into the edit there, even before he bust up and down. So that was great. We had some more Sauts, who we hadn't seen too much from really.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this is a really good episode actually.
No, I liked it.
This one goes from 14 players down to 12.
Mm-hmm.
Again, some very good action on both tables. We see some ups and downs of many players, not just one hand of them. Okay, great. We see Blumstein doubles up Ott and then doubles through Ott. Some good up and down. And then on table 2, Saud does not want to see Hesp cards after he loses. Again, only the second example of someone refusing. And Hesp even chimes in, you only get to ask once. Oh, no, I only ask once. Okay, no, you don't want to see it. You don't have to see it. And it's good to have rules because like any good horror film, you got to have rules.
Of course, yeah.
And so from there, there's a lot of emotion really on display in this episode. The double ups really mean something, with only 14, 13 players left. You're so close to the finish line, but you have to get there first. And this is really when that tension level hits that next category of increase.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell with players Blumstein's, wearing his emotions on his sleeve. Stewart also, is trying to sort of be excitable, and his is bust out, even though he wasn't a super characterized player. It's a little heartbreaking because you kind of get the sense that he's more of one of the personable players left in the field. And then Ren is just his nervous self. I mean, there's a couple spots where, manages to push Lamb around and all that, but, he's still, 17 million at the end of the episode, still something to work with, but still by no means out of the danger zone yet.
Lamb probably had one of the more frustrating day sevens of the players to make it to the final table because he had to chips down on day 7.
Right.
He had he bust 2 players at the end of episode 14. He bust Riard, the Biard, and Messina, who was second in chips when the day began, is at the 27 million once he bust Messina. And he's down almost a full 10 million when the final table action begins. So for Lamb, who's trying to win the whole thing, that's not the trajectory you're trying to make.
Absolutely.
And so again, I really liked episode 15 as far as those sort of penultimate episodes before the final table. It's some good stuff, and that leads us down to that final hurdle before the final table, episode number 16, which goes from 12 players down to 9. So that you have 2 6-handed tables, which again a lot of people's bread and butter is 6 max. So it's kind of some their comfort zone, and lots of some brutal happenstances in this episode.
Oh yeah, I mean Dubini busts right off the bat, and then we're down to 11-handed, and then we have Piccioli doubling up with a river 8, and screaming and jumping around. I mean, it's so many swings right off the bat to begin the episode, and I was surprised how much time they spent 10-handed as well.
Well,
they devote that much time to that.
I don't want to zoom through his action because there's some really good action here. Yeah. So Piccioli 2 outer magic against Saut, 8s against ace 4. Saut flops trip aces, and then on a 2 outer, I remember the live coverage had Sfandiari covering this hand. He's like, "Oh my God, 2 outer!" And then of course Piccioli goes, "Let's go! Let's go!" Never before will you see someone so excited to have 29 big blinds.
Right. Funny, huh?
Nowhere out of the woods yet with 11 left, but definitely back in the action. And you didn't even mention that possibly one of my favorite moments of the entire main event is Ben Lamb being so tilty that he can't get a count on Michael Ruan's yellow chips.
That is funny, yeah. That's pretty funny.
9 or 10 yellows, it matters. Like, no, it does not matter, man. Fold the 10s. Stop being such a jerk about it. It's like a Dan Smith level move there, trying to get an illegal count of his chips. If Ruan doesn't want to count his chips, he doesn't have to count his chips.
That's true. Yeah, that is a weird moment, isn't it? Because Lamb usually doesn't get out of line like that. He's usually a pretty nice guy. So.
Well, Lamb has his yellow chips in stacks of 5, so there's no ambiguity. And so he, kind of expects the same. I mean, Ruan and Lamb at this point are both 2 of the shorter stacks in the field, so they're trying to, make it over the hump. And Lamb, again, he makes the correct fold, which is great. But Ruan just kind of sits there, frozen.
Right.
And, the dealer can't count his chips. The director can't count his chips. It wasn't all in. It was just facing a bet or facing a raise. So I don't know what Lamb's thought process was. If it was all in, if it was an act, if it was for real, if it was a mixture of both. But in any case, it's just kind of, I have to laugh at that kind of moment.
That's a funny moment.
And so with 11 players left, Oliveira overvalues 2 pair against John Hesp flush. So once again, Hesp gets handed boatloads of chips and hits 71 million in the chip lead, which remember that number because that's only going to go up at this point from the final 10 onward. And so with that, with 27 minutes left in the episode is when the final 10 action begins.
Yeah, I mean, it gives plenty of time to let this play out. We get, plenty of good moments from pretty much everybody. I mean, everybody's having a pretty good time except Ren, who's just, I don't want to be mean to the guy because, you're allowed to, if you want to be serious and stoic, that's fine. But he just looks so sad and just so, I just want to give him a hug or something.
Well, there's so many good moments in the final bubble table action. This actual section of the tournament was 21 hands long. So, again, not super short, not super, kind of, it's 2 orbits plus a hand. Lamb began as a short stack of 10 left. Ruan and Piccioli are kind of trying to hang in there, as you would assume from their chip stacks. Hesp gives me one of the most quotable lines of the entire main event. People are telling me I'm showing too many hands, but just for fun. Do you want to see?
It's a great hand. Yeah,
he's climbing the chip counts as he began final 10 of 71 million, and he ends the this session with 85 million. So it's that's almost as many chips as a couple of the shorter stacks have. So very impressive stuff. And the table just loves it. I mean, they're eating up. It's definitely a good source of de-stress in this very stressful part of the game.
But he's not the top stack because Mr. Blumstein just sick manages to get better of Sinclair in a spot. I mean, just so sick. I mean, Sinclair, I mean, buddy, I think you gotta shut down there. I mean, I don't know.
Well, Sinclair had been down a little bit from his peak of like 65, 68 million in the chip lead earlier in day 7. He was about around 50 million or so at this point. Blumstein, not a folder, as he called himself. And so Blumstein's self-reputation is not being a folder, and knows the rep of Sinclair being, bluffer. Your reputation precedes you, sir. And he makes a big 13 million chip call on the river with Parka 10s on an ace-high board. Sinclair has Jack 4, so of course it's good against the Jack high. And that is what propels Blumstein to the chip tops, and it knocks Sinclair down to the bottom third of the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge change in chip stacks. I mean, Sinclair also being the hyper-aggressive player. I mean, if he's got that chip stacks, if the chip stacks are flipped, I mean, maybe Sinclair wins it. I think he definitely has a shot of winning the whole thing, but dropping him down to 20 million, that's so sick.
And I don't know if you remember, but the next in 2018, Blumstein makes a hero call all in of 10s and busts on day 1.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of it's his habit. He won't fold the 2 10s on any board on the river, and so that's his style. So obviously it worked for him this time, but nonetheless. And then there was I call it the friend versus friend blood in the water hand. But there was, but before the hand actually happens, you hear I think Piccioli and Lamb talking before the hand about Jack 7, like there was a raise by I think Ruan against Piccioli of Jack 7, and then it gets right into this friend versus close friends. These are not just friends. Oh, I know when I had dinner from once, with some buddies at a bar or something. These are actual friends competing in. Again, on the bubble of the final table, $1 million guaranteed to 9th place. Ace King against 2 10s pre-flop.
It's so sick. I mean, yeah, they had a segment earlier. I think it was in a previous episode with Piccioli talking about his relationship with Rand. You even see Piccioli.
That was this episode.
Yeah, you even see Piccioli standing on Rand's rail in 2016. I mean, Ruan, if the Ace King wins, he is going to do what happens once in a decade, which is back-to-back final table. It's going to do it a few years early. I mean, this is such a sick spot. And Piccioli, to his credit, he's just completely almost catatonic. He's so sad. He gets one line in, "It's my year," sorry, buddy, but it's just heartbreaking.
Needle though, that's a pretty brutal needle, I think. I
mean, it is a brutal needle, yeah.
I don't think it was meant as a needle, but as spoken, it was a needle, an inadvertent needle.
An inadvertent needle.
And so what do you think? Was Piccioli right to make that call, though? For all his chips, the blinds, 400K, 800K, that each had, the high teens in chips. I feel like, with Ruan raising that many chips, opening, I think it was a 2-bet all in. It's a tough spot, but I feel like 10s, you're hoping it's Ace King. I guess it's kind of, if he has 2 jacks, queens, kings, aces, he's not going to just go all in now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he's going to try to do something like that with Ace King. And you're trying to win the thing. You're not just trying to get 8th or 9th. You're trying to, he had 33 million to start the final table. He's in 4th place. Yeah, Hesp and Blumstein have a lot of chips, but you're in a good position to win the tournament now. Especially you're a previous bracelet winner, the game. You're in a good position to win the tournament now if you win that hand. So yeah, I mean, I don't mind the call. It's a 6 spot. I mean, it's a 6 spot for so many different reasons. And, Ruan busts right afterward to Solace. I mean, I think you got to just go with it with the 10s, yeah.
I mean, but also it's your friend. And
yeah.
You're trying to play poker off on emotions about trying to, let your personal relationships affect your play. Like if it's you and me at this final table, I'm probably folding against you as your type player. But I don't want to bust you, obviously. But then someone's going to bust in 10th place. So, there's no guarantee that if Piccioli folds that he's going to, spin it up in any way to
right.
So it's a tough spot. I think it's been debated for, probably ever since. And there's no right answer, but I think you kind of have to call because it looks like ace king. The shove looks like ace king to me.
Yeah, you call.
But then again, you're only so much of a favorite against ace king, but it's a tough spot nonetheless.
It is. It's a 6 spot. It's a tough spot. It's heartbreaking to see Rand come that far and just one way, so close, but it's what happens.
I mean, technically, they're all at the same table, so it's the final table. Technically,
doesn't count.
Anyway, so as a result of that sort of final shakedown of the chips, we have one of the more crazy chip distributions for the final table spread. We have 2 big stacks with a large percentage of all the chips, with Blumstein over 90 million, Hesp over 85 million, and then even third place is only like 35 million or so. Yep. So really large gap, and so it has a drastic effect on the actual play of all the players once the final table action takes place.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I mean, from Pollock to Lamb, there's only a 17 million chip difference. So it's like, it's these giant peaks and then it's just a flat line. I mean, it's still anybody's game for, the top 3.
Well, you say the top 3, but really one double up on the short stack and you're in third place, basically.
Right, exactly.
The blinds being 400K, 800K, the short stack has a little over 20 big blinds. Compared to a couple of the last main events, the short stack not quite as short as Ben Lamb, shorter than what Ben Lamb was in 2017. We had like guys like Buderoni and Fernando Pons that had 12 blinds or something like that. So 20 big blinds makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
Especially when you have a lot of players playing very, very tight for a very long time at this final table, with the chip leaders kind of getting into the action the most.
Very true.
So before we discuss that final table, I think it's important to break down the focus all 9 of them got, the how well we know them sort of factor that we always discuss. So again, at the top, Hesp, both in chips and screen time and focus, at the top, number 1. Blumstein and Sinclair definitely in there. Again, we see a lot of their personality through how they play, so that it was helpful. I would say number 4, maybe it's either Saud or Dan Ott. I have to put at number 4.
You wouldn't put Lamb there?
I guess Lamb maybe.
Yeah, I think Lamb goes there.
But really the big losers here are Salas, who we know nothing about. He's in maybe 3 hands the whole entire time. One of them was that last one against Ruan.
He has a nice coat and he's Argentinian. That's about it. That's all we know. And he says Segura. That's about it.
It'll be more important in a couple of years. But and then Pollock, again, very little. We saw him bust Pham to win a lot of chips on day 7, but besides that, pretty much a nothing burger edit. Piccioli, again, a little bit towards the end, his 2-outer, his, constant double ups, and of course his Ruan drama, but definitely below what you would expect from someone on the final table.
Yeah, I mean, I think all 9 people who make the final table should have moments where we understand who their personalities are and what their styles of play are. I think it's just that simple. You can characterize 9 people throughout a dozen episodes of television, I think, fairly easily.
And, Ott kind of got the rep for being a bluffer, and we do see a fair number of bluffs from him, and not all of them work, but it does lend us to what his style is. So, again, a pretty top-heavy edit in the grand scheme of things. So that's a little bit of a letdown. But at least if it had to be someone to get a lot of fools, at least it was John Hesp. At least it was him.
Of course, yeah.
And so a 2-part final table, one of the better balanced edits and one of the better paced final tables we've had in a while. The first part only goes from 9 players down to 7, which is such a relief, because I think that first half of the table was so much more important than the back half. So it's good to kind of have, well, as far as giving everybody a chance to.
Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah.
And with the exception of someone who busts out very early, which you can't blame the edit for, everybody gets in the action pretty much in some capacity. Obviously, some a lot more than others in both good and bad situations.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into that, but obviously Lamb busts fairly early on in the episode. Not after some fun Hesp moments and get all the table interested, but it's a shame that Lamb couldn't hang in there and sort of see more from him.
Well, as a short stack, he had a plan. I'm okay with 1 million. I want to go for the win.
Right.
If he doubles up once, he's in the top like 3 in chips. So that really does make a difference. But the very first 3 hands of the night, John Hesp wins all 3 and jumps into the chip lead. Right off the bat, he bluffs Saut hard with calling a 3-bet with King 9 offsuit and min-raising on the flop with King High, and showing the crowd, getting the table and the crowd going, like just energy going wild. Everyone's loving it. Even Ben Lamb is fist bumping people. It's just a great start to the action as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
That's true, yeah. It's a shame about Saut. I mean,
I don't feel as bad for him. He makes it pretty far into this final table.
Yeah.
The next hand, number 2, Hesp 3-bets Dana with queens, and then accidentally tries to show them, but they kind of go flying everywhere. It's kind of funny. Wait a minute, 2 of them into the chip lead, and then off screen we see he wins hand 3, and then Ben Lamb does his ace-9 shove of 20 big blinds into Sinclair, who had the ace-queen and snap called. Again, I think it's a bad move for the ace-9, though.
Yeah, I'm with you.
If you're going to play a hand, if you're going to go for a 3-bet shove like that, you're going to got to bet an ace-9, especially when I don't think too many better hands are folding.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Even if it's Sinclair with Jack 4. And then for the most part, it's pretty much the John Hesp show. Hesp, wins some, loses some. He wins hand number 22 of his final table. He wins a huge 3-way putt against Pollock and Blumstein, of course, those being the other 2 top 3 stacks at the table at that point, and increases his chip lead, and then makes the classic out of turn order 20 million 4-bet against Dan Otts. To the amusement of Bryan Piccioli, who's like 20 million to the crowd, which was more chips than what half the table had left at that point.
Exactly.
And then some great talk by Hesp. You have a big hand? I sure do. I sure do. And then he lies about lying by saying he'll see the hand in 30 minutes, not at that moment, and does not get a fist bump from Blumstein for that. And you should really mention the table dynamic and the table draw. You have the 2 big stacks pretty much leaning the table onto its side of all the chips that they have on that side, and they're actually getting involved in quite a few pots against each other. Right.
I mean, they were going at it from the outset onward. I mean, there's a couple other players who, again, mix it up in here. Ott manages to double up through Blumstein when Blumstein shoves a straight draw. But it really is the Blumstein and Hesp show right off the bat for really no good reason. I mean, I don't understand why, if you're either player, why would you want to go heads up against the other guy? Try to pick off the smaller stacks.
Well, the problem is you have a lot of, under the gun Blumstein, John Hesp, big blind situations. You have a lot of players playing very tight. We see a good number of hands that guys like Piccioli and even the Lamb are folding ace-7 suited, queen jack suited. They're chip stacks. They don't have enough chips to really mix it up against these 2 guys that were just increasing their stacks from the start, and they already had so many chips when the table began. So it really exacerbated that problem. So you really have to keep it close to the vest if you're trying to ladder up and make some money. Granted, Ben Lamb did go out first. So you at least won some money that day. That kind of takes away that 9th place sort of mental, stress of finishing out first. But it was not in the November 9th. This is the first, final table that takes place 2 days after the action day 7 finish. So maybe a little bit less of that stress existed. But nonetheless, Hesp gets up to 132 million chips. So he upped his stack 30 million from the day's beginning. Some from Blumstein, but a lot from everybody else. So he had increased by 50 million, and the half of the table didn't even have that much to begin with. So,
can we just skip this next part? Can we just skip it?
Well, so there's kind of a bad. So about 44 hands into the action, Pollock gets paid off big against Hesp with a straight, and if Hesp doesn't lose that hand, then the next hand after that isn't as big a deal in a lot of ways. But with it, we have the 47th hand of the action. We have the disaster of the Blumstein-Hesp cooler disaster, where we see a very bad Hollywood re-raise by Hesp with top 2 pair against top set of Blumstein. Hesp goes all in. Blumstein doubles up to 180 million or whatever the heck it is. Hesp drops down to 24 million. And the hearts and spirits of the entire crowd in the whole country are deflated forevermore.
This is just, this is the pose I adopted when I saw that hand. Ugh. I remember watching that live. That was just so sickening. I remember you saying when Hesp got up out of his seat, that usually means he's going to fold. I remember you saying that. I'm like, oh, so sick.
Brutal. It changed the whole dynamic of the whole table. From there on, it's just the Blumstein show from that point on. Hesp was never the same. His antics, his talk, his stack, never the same. Nothing. I mean, to Hesp's credit, he hangs in there for quite a bit longer than I probably would have guessed he would have. But it really just took the, as a footing as when in 2015 Gronkowski broke his ankle against the Broncos on Sunday Football, and that was it. That's equally as distressing as it was as this scene was for me watching that.
It was as deflating as Tom Brady deflated the footballs before the game, you know. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it's also just weird on an editing perspective because Hesp has gotten such a huge edit up till this point. And they've even kept sort of implying in the edits, like, hey, maybe he's going to win this one. Maybe he's going to go heads up. So to see him just all of a sudden give all his chips over to Blumstein, who, has been in the edit. We see a segment earlier in the episode, which is sort of recapping his interviews, the camera, how like on day 4, he was feeling this one way. Now on day 7, he's feeling this. It's just such a weird swerve. It's like reading a novel, like a detective novel, where you think someone's the killer the whole time, and then it turns out it's somebody else, just out of nowhere.
Even Norma's wearing a Hesp costume in the booth that night because he was, kind of like in Blumenfield situation, kind of imitating his idol on the table, the altar at the table. And if that hand happens against any other player, I mean, it hurts Hesp. Maybe he gets angry, but he still has so many chips to play with. I mean, he was down from his peak of 130 million when that hand began. He had like 100 million, but it just completely shifted. He didn't, play the same the rest of the tournament, which again, you don't have as many chips. You can't really do that, but it just wrecks the party. And then in the next hand in the edit, though, was 17 hands later, we see Sinclair bust Piccioli, who finally, gets some momentum at the final table. Aces against Sinclair's King Jack, and despite flopping a king, Sinclair goes out in 8th place. So again, the two of the short stacks going out first, as you kind of expect, but with a lot of drama and Hesp antics in the middle. Yeah,
I mean, it's, Sinclair just had lost all those chips to Blumstein on the, 10-handed. It's a shame again that, both Lamb and Sinclair, who had shown some moxie, had been mixing it up, and they're both bust early. But I guess that's predictable. It's Blumstein having 156 million chips to end the episode. Pollock in second place with 79 million. So Blumstein's got nearly 2 times more chips than the second place. And Piccioli's in third place with 37 million. I mean, it's just so sick.
Yeah, it's like a Jamie Gold, Joe McKeon setup basically at this point.
Yeah, and pretty much it's Blumstein's to lose, and like 60% of the time he's going to win. I mean, it's just so sick.
And some might say that John Hesp got too much of the edit, but he was the most active of all the players. So, and he was one of the most. Sure. So it's kind of hard to say that they shouldn't have shown those hands when that was what was happening.
Yeah.
And so we get a final episode number 18, the final table part 2, 7 playing down to 1. And again, it's a little bit of a rushed episode. The heads up part a little bit weak.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. There's only 1 episode left. And so as the episode starts off, keeping in mind that this final table was spread across 3 days live, so days 8, 9, 10, they actually finished day 8 with 7 left, much as the last episode ended. So this is actually 2 days of the final table into 1 episode.
Mm-hmm.
So Damian Salas, who was kind of the resident, taking a long time to fold, make decisions at the table, a la guys like Offers v. Stern in years past. He 38 hands into the day, busts after being luckily rivered by Dana. Like, I would not have noticed another like half an hour of just pure Salas tank time wasting if he had stayed in at that point. So he goes out in 7th place.
I do wish to apologize so when we were watching this live bet, I don't know if you remember this or not. When Salas busted, I jumped up and I said, "That's what you deserve, you knit rolling fuck," or whatever. I want to apologize to Damian Salas. Okay, he's clearly a nice guy, and obviously a couple of years later he took it down. So, I want to make a public apology to Damian Salas if you're listening. I'm very sorry, dude. I wasn't thinking.
Well, it was a private exclamation. It wasn't like a public statement. Like you didn't tweet, Damian Salas can suck it. You just said, you were annoyed by how slow he was. And you were 5 years younger. You were a young boy back then.
Yeah, exactly. It was nit rolling fuck. That's not the worst thing in the world, to call somebody. So again, sorry, Damien, if you're listening, give me your leather coat.
And at this point, watching live as a viewer, I've checked out of the idea that Hesp will win this thing or come close. So every time he ladders up. So I'm just happy each time, because you just had to think that after that cooler that he could be out next, just in 8th place, because he had the world in his hands and he lost it. But here we are with 6 left. He's still in. Okay, let's get back into things. And then the tide starts to turn against Blumstein a little bit. Antoine Saout wins a flip against Blumstein for 50 million chips. That's a substantial amount at this point in the tournament. Dan Ott against Piccioli. Piccioli makes a bad river call when Ott has the best hands. And then just a couple of hands later in real time, blind against blind, Dan Ott gets kings, and the big blind against Piccioli's ace-7 shove pre-flop, and Piccioli busts. I mean, again, blind versus blind, an ace in your short start, that's going to happen, I guess, sometimes. But
right.
Piccioli goes out in 6th place, which was, again, he began the table in 4th place, so that's, again, kind of a slight letdown given your, chip distribution. But, it's nothing to be too upset about when you have, a middling stack for the whole tournament.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to make more than $1 million. I wouldn't be complaining.
And just a couple of hands later, Antoine Saout gets screwed by the most brutal, awful runouts possible against Blumstein. Could you have folded that hand, Sam, with 3 jacks?
So the action goes, Blumstein makes it 4.2 million after Pollock tells him to fold, which is funny. Saout calls, check 2x on the flop. Blumstein gets his straight, 5.6 million, and Saout calls, and then Blumstein shoves on the river. I mean, what's Blumstein doing with 5.6 there on the turn? I don't know. I mean, top in a flush draw, okay, it makes sense to call, but I think when you miss your draw on the river, trips is good. I mean, I don't know. I think you could get away from it there.
I mean, the problem is it's Blumstein. He's the chip leader. He's pounding the table. He's pounding. He's the most likely to be bluffing of everyone else on the table. And the only one who has really any chips to be doing a bluff like that anyway. So I don't blame Saout too much. I mean, obviously, if he wins that hand, he's got a legit chance to really to do something. But if you fold, you only have so many chips left. You can't just fold your way down to 0. So
that's true, yeah.
That's not. And with just 4 left, Hesp unfortunately busts on hand number 135. So again, he played almost 100 hands after that cooler without messing up too badly, clearly. And he busts to Ben Pollock. Pollock steals his hat for a second. Kind of fun stuff. And it's a sad moment, but obviously 4th place is fantastic. And, it could have been more, but it could have been worse too.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, it could have very well been 8th place that he just tilts off and busts in 8th. It's a shame that we didn't really see too much of him in this episode. I mean, I know that he kind of, was hanging in there, just 1 or 2 hands just to see what else he was doing. But, it's the way it goes.
Pretty much folding the rest of he put double up once off screen from the hand blog I saw. But, couldn't do much after that with so few chips, much like everybody else kind of playing it tight when they're, short stack 20, 30 million chips. With the And with that hand, day 9 ends and day 10 begins, which obviously is kind of the halfway point of the episode. And they actually threw Hesp into the special shuffle up a deal moments when this happened live, and that was kind of fun because he was such a beloved character in that main event. So that was fun to have. And we do see him do a little bit of that. He kind of gets into the ceremony at the very end when the winner is crowned. So that was kind of fun to have him.
Yeah, he's like walking around on the floor and like shaking everybody's hand, which I thought was really funny. Like, it's just weird. It's a weird little moment.
And he's an instant celebrity just for being 4th place. He's the celebrity of the tournament.
Yeah.
And so, Dan Ott, it doesn't really show in this edit, but he was the only one at the table that ever really seemed like he was getting the best of Blumstein in the hand-to-hand sort of action. Unfortunately, we don't really get to see a ton of it in this episode because Blumstein kind of empties the clip against Ott with king high, and Ott ends up folding in pocket 8s with flush draw that missed. And I don't blame the fold, I guess, but it's just kind of brutal to see Blumstein just kind of keep going for it and it working every time.
Yeah, I mean, Blumstein, countered opposition here or there, but once he had all those chips, I mean, it was just his. The bracelet was pretty much around his wrist as long as he didn't get into some horrible situation, and he didn't. I mean, this was a very boring thing to watch live. Like, I'm sorry about just the way my demeanor is, but like after Hesp bust, I remember, I went to bed before Hesp bust. I wake up the next morning, I hear these busts, and I'm like, oh, I have to watch the final three without Hesp now. Blumstein's got this. What's going to happen? Blumstein's just going to win. How quick is it going to be is the only real deliberation there is.
I mean, there were a couple of exciting hands here because there's a big three-way all-in that results in Ott winning the huge pot and Pollock busting. Blumstein actually had the best hand pre-flop and, had a conceivable chance of actually just ending the tournament right there.
50% chance, yeah.
And then so Ott wins that pot that kind of gives him enough chips to at least fight on some equal footing with Blumstein for a little bit. I mean, heads up play lasts 64 hands, so fairly long battle, not nearly as long as the marathon we saw with Quewin and Gordon Vail, but enough to have some back and forth. Certainly not as short as things like Hashem and Denneman, for example. The very first hand of heads up, Daynot makes a straight flush and wins in medium pot against Blumstein. So it was a good omen to start, so to speak. But then we only get three hands in the whole episode of heads up play, that straight flush being one, the final hand being the last one, and one, meh hand in between. And so it's the last time we had a river winner for the main event was, I believe it was Jerry Yang against 07 with the river straight against Tuan Lam.
Yep.
So it's a crazy ending, but it's a brutal end considering Blumstein had these brutal ways of busting out somebody, both Saut, cooling Heps, and then Daynot in this final table.
Yeah, I mean, Blumstein was obviously a very talented player. I'm not trying to take any away from him, but yeah, he got so lucky. He really did got so lucky just from 10-handed onward. I mean, it takes a little bit of shine off of his performance. And I just remember watching heads up and being so bored. Blumstein would bet Ott would fold. Ott was playing super tight. With the ace-8 of diamonds there, okay, maybe Blumstein's got ace-10. You still call. I mean, come on, it's an ace heads up. It's a suited ace heads up. He tanked for like 3 minutes. I remember watching that hand live, him tanking. And then that 2 came up on the river. It was almost like karmic justice almost for that.
So my final takeaway from this final episode is that there was no love for Solace in the edit. The one hand he's shown in, he busts in this final table, which is brutal. I thought the action was pretty good for the most part in this episode, even if it was, not the most satisfying action. But again, there's a bit of a rushed ending with some weak heads-up content, considering we've had some great heads-up battles the last couple of main events. And so it kind of feels like it kind of symbolizes this entire main event, in that we had some great characters, some great hands, but some poor narratives and some poor directions that the edit went in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, again, Hesp is so entertaining that he's going to take the cake no matter what percentage of the edit you give him. Yeah. I mean, he's so entertaining and he's so enlivening. And the best character moments were when people responding to Hesp. Blumstein responding to Hesp, Piccioli responding to Hesp,
even Ruan
responding to Hesp. Yeah, Ruan too. I mean, everybody's best moment was faring off against him. So just to sort of see the lack of moments, namely through the poker play that we, elsewhere in the coverage, it's just a little disappointing. And then, I mean, Blumstein winning the whole thing, it's satisfying on a certain level because he was a first-timer and he'd been talked about throughout, but it would have been a lot more satisfying if Hesp had won. It's just that simple.
Yeah. And so as a whole, I mean, I enjoy a lot of this main event, but it's definitely in that sort of that bottom tier, especially from the rough start to this main event really had. And it's a shame, but, it's my opinion. And I loved having a lot of these repeat performers making deep runs. Saut, Ruan, Lam. I always like that sort of narrative. We don't get too many of that in the main events nowadays, so it's good to have that come back. But a little bit let down. But it's that's Pokergo for letting you down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking B minus for this season, somewhere in that range.
B's too high for me, I think.
Really? Yeah. I mean. Hesp was very enjoyable. There were definitely a lot of enjoyable moments throughout. The segments weren't super interesting.
Hear them too.
Yeah, Staples, just, you got to go, buddy. I'm sorry. No offense. You seem like a nice guy, but you're just trying way too hard. I'd say that there's enough here in terms of just the characters and having, Blumstein as a first timer being featured throughout. There's a little bit of that narrative there that I feel is satisfying. It's not super horrible, but it's not super great either. It's kind of in that sort of gray area, which again, B minus feels about right for me.
Well, it's kind of like eating like bad pizza, but it's still pizza.
Yeah.
You like it, but you don't like it. I mean, I think we both gave the first half of this main event like a C.
Yeah, something like that.
And so I wouldn't give this second half. Like I give it maybe the second half a B, so that average it together to be like a C plus.
All right, yeah, I would give it like a B minus, I'd say.
Okay. Well, 79.9, 80.1.
Yeah, there you go.
And so again, a bit better than the worst main events we've had, but not in that next level above it. So I guess back to our talk of your journey in the Mind Sport Olympiad, because last we checked with you were in top couple of spots, and since then not been so good for you?
Well, kind of, sort of. So back on the 14th, which was last week, was the Texas Hold'em Deep Stack tournament. And I placed in 4th out of 40 players. So it had just been, I was just winning a couple of hands here or there. Not like a super big stack at any point, but just kind of hanging in there, managing to just kind of win some pots. When we got down to the final 8, I was 8th in chips. And it was really just, from 8th to 4th, just really just kind of hanging in there, just, raise and take, raise and take, raise and take. And then finally, when we were 4-handed, I had 25K and the other 3 had 100K. So, yeah, I mean, I busted in 4th. I was 1 away from a medal, but I also wasn't even close to getting a medal. It's one of those, like, sort of frustrating spots. And I shoved with, like, ace-9 into kings or something. I think it was one of those, I had, like, very few big blinds at that point, so ace-9's a fine shove, and he just woke up with kings. Yeah, I mean, 4th place, it's like, all right, I'm getting in the leaderboard. I got a shot to win this thing. Baducci could not have gone worse, frankly. Badugi could not have gone worse. I've played a couple of Badugi sit and goes in the past. I think I won maybe one of them. I'm not like a skilled player in Badugi at all. I'm not super knowledgeable about the game, but I know the basics of it. And I would just kept being dealt jack high Badugis. And usually that would be good when I was dealt Badugis before the first draw, but it was never good here. I just kept getting cooler the whole way through, won a couple of hands here or there, but I think I busted after 1 hour. I think I was like 24th place or something out of 29. And then the horse event, which was the next day. So Badugi was on Wednesday, horses on Thursday, and I love mixed games, so I was very excited for this. Same deal. I was just got off to a bad start with it was one of those classic Omaha moments, second nuts versus nuts. I had the flush, he had a boat, and I lost a bunch of chips right off the bat. And I just couldn't get anything going. And again, after about like an hour, I busted. But this time, the Omaha event, we have a very special guest for this event. Ben also played the event. We both played it. And the same thing happened that happened in the previous 2 events for me. I lost with ace-high flush versus a boat at like 10 minutes into the tournament, and it was down to like 9,000, and I just never got above the starting stack once. Hung in there a little bit, managed to kind of just raise and take some pots, and then after about an hour and a half, do you want to tell the story or what? I mean,
well, so we had both made, so there were 32 players to begin. So 9-handed. So we're both on different tables. So we're done in the final 2 tables. I'm, middling along. I'll get to my turn, I guess, after we talk about yours. But I'm watching his table while I'm playing my table, and Sam tells me he has the nuts straight, and so he bets pot on the flop, gets called by the chip leader of the tournament. On the turn, it's a safe card. He goes all in for the last little bit. Guy calls, and his opponent rivers a superior straight to Sam's straight.
It was just heartbreaking. I mean, oh my God, just go, I was waiting for that spot, and I finally get my chips in right, and it just doesn't pan out. I mean, something similar happened earlier in the tournament where I had top set, and the guy called all in with flush draw. If I hold up there, I have 12K. I'm good to go to maneuver my stack, but the river gave him the flush. So, cards just weren't going my way. I was a little disappointed afterward, but that's what happens in poker.
And in the Mind Sport Olympiad, the top half of the field gets points. So with 30 left, there were 18 left. You finished in 18th. I just didn't have any chips the whole time. The one time I had a lot of chips, not a lot of chips. I had some chips, and I had 3 of a kind with an ace kicker, and the guy turns a superior full house. I fell outs, by the way, and he makes another improves it on the river, of course. So I hang in there. After you bust out, I double up once, sort of, and I have 2/3 of chip average. I make the top half of the field, so I earn some points, but I ended up busting in 14th place out of 32 when I saw a flop maybe that I shouldn't have with some half rag cards, but I flop a middle pair, a double gutter, and a flush draw. And the other guy who I'm trying to beat because he won an event earlier in the MSO, so I'm trying to minimize his point wins, goes all in. And I'm pretty sure he might have a straight, which I could beat with a flush or a better straight, or maybe, even if he's got, a set, I can still outdraw it, and it goes brick. And so I lose the board. But I got a couple points, my first points in the MSO, so I'm happy to be on the scoreboard in some capacity. But I just was pretty card dead. Whenever I made the nuts, I'd always chop. So it's kind of hard to get lucky when somebody else gets lucky too.
Yeah, so in terms of the overall standings, I am in the top 10, but the guy who's in first place has, as of this moment, 30 more points than me. He's a guy named Dario de Taffioli, and according to this, he's got more than 100 medals in the Mind Sports Olympiad, all the way back to the 1990s. He has 100 and looks like 18 medals. So this guy is hardcore. Yeah. So in order for me to have any chance of really even getting third place, I really have to win one of these events to have a really good shot at getting third place overall. And the best I've gotten is third place. So there's a couple more events remaining. I think there's actually just 2 events remaining. There's an Omaha high-low event that's on Monday the 23rd, and then a heads-up Hold'em event that's on next Saturday. That's the 28th. So that's going to be it. So this is, pretty much the make or break time, and not getting points these last couple events definitely made a big deal. But, I already have a medal for this series, so that's nice. That's all I really cared about. I just didn't want to have just one MSO medal for forever. I wanted to show that, there wasn't a fluke back.
One a year or something like that. Yeah, one-ish a year.
One-ish a year, Yeah.
And as far as on the live poker scene, Sam and I are looking into playing into some live poker tournaments sometime in June, because I'm not going to be able to go to Vegas this year because of work, unfortunately. But I think that could be fun to do a little thing there. And once we figure out where we're playing, when we're playing, if it's before our next podcast, we can always announce it and see if anybody listening will join us for that event. And that should be fun.
The title of our podcast is apt. We are fish. We are not, professional poker players or anything. So, we're just trying to have some fun here. We're not expecting to roll up to a casino and win $10,000 or something. We're just trying to have fun.
Not at all. So that'll be fun. And I'm working on getting a special guest to our next podcast. I don't want to tease it because in case it doesn't pan out, I don't want to promise anything false. But I'm very excited for who we might have for our next episode, or maybe the one after that, depending on their schedule. And so that should be fun too. Yeah, and if you're at all interested in being on the show, whatever place you got in the main event, if you busted on day 1, if you're in the background of a shot, if your brother got 4th place one year, whatever. If you're interested in being on the show, let us know. We're happy to have any guests on. Again, thanks to Michael Novinsky for, showing up. That's the kind of interview style that both Ben and I like, just sort of mixing it up, asking different questions about how you feel about poker and your performance and all that. And then any comments and suggestions or questions about us that you'd like us to answer, you can leave in the comments below. So feel free to let us, reach out to us about anything. We did have a couple of comments on Reddit, actually, when I mentioned how we discussed why we don't find Joe Stapleton funny. And this one guy concurred with our opinion, and so that was, good to know that our opinions aren't unique to only us. People out there do agree that Stapleton needs to work on his humor because it doesn't work for me or for anybody else, clearly.
He's just trying too hard. I mean, the thing about Norm is that Norm has lawn. You know, it's the foil and the straight man, so the two can kind of bounce off of each other and feed off of each other. Even though some of Norm's material, he mentioned Norm's phone jokes last time, and just how not cringe isn't really the good word, but it's close to it.
Yeah.
You know, but Stapleton, yeah, I've never found funny. Yeah. Sorry.
But I think that just about wraps up our take on the 2017 main event part 2. Next time we'll be covering the 2018 main event. It's a fairly similar style to 2017 in its composition, except for the fact that I think they begin on day 5. So say goodbye to the first half of the tournament, unfortunately, but I guess it might be for the better given our, take on the edit in this main event. But until then, guys, enjoy. We're getting very close to the resumption of the World Series of Poker in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming up, so poker news will be hot on the internet, and we're happy to be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll try to cover as much of the WSOP as we can, sort of episode to episode. We're not going to release sort of like live episodes every, day or anything like that, but we'll try to talk about it as much as we can.
Yeah, and until then, guys, we'll see you next time.
Fold the ace 10.
Good one. All right, guys, bye.